Hello and welcome back to An Old Man Watches, where today I'm going to be talking about the 2010 Russo-Ukrainian miniseries Black Sheep. It's set in 1941, and the Germans are pouring eastward during Operation Barbarossa, their invasion of the Soviet Union. 7 inmates at a Soviet prison camp are sent on a work detail. They're under armed guard, of course, but the rapid German advance catches the authorities unprepared. The prisoners seize the opportunity to escape when a Luftwaffe strafing run kills their guards. Now, 6 of the escapees are common criminals, thieves and ruffians all. The last, a man they call Picasso, is a stranger to them, but it seems he is known to the new commandant of the prison camp. When the commandant sees Picasso's file in the camp records, he launches an immediate search for the missing prisoners that will continue for the remainder of the movie/slash miniseries. The 7 men, meanwhile, have travelled to a tiny hamlet deep in the forest. This is where Picasso grew up, and he assures the others that it should be safe, and it is not even on any map. Now, we are told immediately after this that the Soviet secret police have been to the village and taken away Picasso's aunt and cousin. So even if this wasn't a movie and it was obvious that the place is going to be attacked, I would take those assurances with a grain of salt. The 6 criminals, however, seem to be fresh out of sodium chloride. They settle into life in the village, ecstatic to be somewhere that has plentiful food and alcohol, and also warm beds to share with the local women. The local men have all been shipped off to fight the Germans. Again, if this place is unfindable, who shipped them away? But anyway, several entirely voluntary, I'm pleased to say, romantic/slash sexual pairings soon emerge. Now, of course, the village isn't safe. There wouldn't be much of a movie if it was, and German soldiers inevitably find the place. The gang of Soviet ne'er-do-wells managed to hide from the initial attack, eluding discovery by the Nazis, but they now find themselves in the unexpected position of wanting to defend the community of which they've become a part. Now, I've not been able to turn up much information about the production of Black Sheep beyond the companies behind it. IMDb only manages to identify 5 of the cast members, for instance, and in 3 of those cast cases doesn't even have details of who the men actually played. I did find out that the miniseries was pretty well received in the Ukraine, however, receiving 5 award nominations at the country's annual Teletriumph Awards and winning 2 of those categories. Looking into the production was also where I first learned that this was originally a 3-episode miniseries, with each episode being about 50 minutes long, while the version I saw was packaged as a 2-hour movie. That means that probably somewhat over 20 minutes of material must have been cut from the version I saw, which may go some way to explain some of the weaknesses and flaws that I encountered. But before we get to those, let's talk about the obvious inspiration. So, a group of 7 men are about to find themselves as the only defenders of a small village against an invading enemy. You probably don't need me to tell you that this film owes a great debt to Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai and or to the American adaptation of that film, The Magnificent Seven. But this is more than just a direct remake of the familiar scenario. These men aren't mercenaries who have been explicitly hired to defend the village from bandits. They're fugitives who've come here to find shelter. Their motives for fighting back against the Germans are different, a desire to defend those who have taken them in rather than fighting for pay. And while there are themes of some of the mercenaries start to feel at home in the village in Seven Samurai, it's much more a driving motivation of the action here rather than an outcome of it. The wider context is also different. The battle to defend the village is not an independent skirmish with local bandits, but part of a much wider and larger conflict. The Soviet Union is now locked in an existential battle with Nazi Germany, and whatever the outcome of this individual struggle, that wider battle is going to continue. So, taking an evocative, if somewhat familiar scenario and tweaking it in an interesting way is, in my opinion, a pretty good opening premise for a show. And for the first 90 minutes of its runtime, Black Sheep built well on that premise. It had sound production values with good sets and costumes, and the acting seemed solid as well. Obviously, I couldn't understand the actual words the actors were speaking, of course, and was relying on subtitles for their exact meaning, or at least approximate meaning. Subtitles are never 100% accurate. But the tone and tempo of the delivery worked, and the non-verbal aspects of the acting, body language, gestures, expressions, all looked convincing to me. Now, the film isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, of course. It's not lightweight or cheerful entertainment, even though the main characters feel that they found a safe and welcoming haven. It's still a very rustic and backward place, and the threat of both the German army and the Soviet authorities is still out there. The tone of the show is pretty grim on the whole, and we, the audience, know that the safety of the men is only very, very temporary. So there's always that waiting for the other shoe to fall. Alas, in the movie format version of Black Sheep that I saw, the final half hour falls apart pretty badly. Several parts of the action sequences were something of a muddled mess, and they're peppered with what are obviously meant to be big dramatic moments that for me almost all fell flat. At least in part because they're a jarring tonal shift from the previous 90 minutes. Now, I will say there are two big moments that do work quite well, but these are notably the ones that hew closer to the more understated tone of the film's earlier content. And then there's the handling of that whole who is Picasso and why is the prison commandant so keen to find him subplot. There's no conclusion to that thread at all. It just never got resolved. Perhaps it was in the content that was cut to bring this miniseries down to 2 hours. I don't know. Yeah, given the solid, if grim and a little cheerless first 90 minutes, I was very disappointed by how much I felt this went off the rails in its last act. If Seven Soviet Samurai is a pitch that interests you, I suggest you try to find a full-length version of the miniseries, because perhaps it will work better. Next time, do you remember when Richard Grieco was being touted as the new Johnny Depp? Those days were long gone by 2003 when he starred in the made-for-TV science fiction horror film Webs. But that is next time. Until then, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've seen Black Sheep, let me know what you thought of it.